Welcome to Sportsbet Daily for oddsmarket.com. We're off to the other side of the world. It's South Korea and it's UFC Fight Night 165. Now, I would normally say that the experts are in the house, but these two completely disgraced themselves last week for being my live line boys and coming runners-up. You know I'm only joking, Dave and Jay. I think it was an absolute scandal that we never pulled a draw out the bag. Jay, how are you feeling after last week's card?
It was my fault. I picked one fight that was wrong, and it caused us to lose the competition somehow. But made $4,000 on the night.
Exactly.
The only two fights we dropped at the end were the last two fights of the night, Holloway and Covington. So it was a good night.
So you cost us, but
I did.
But I'm all right, Jack, and I'll just put this load in the bank.
Yep.
Good lad. We don't mind that. I don't mind that. If it means that we lose, but you win, then obviously we're happy. Aren't we, Dave?
Yeah, because I won as well. So everybody was profiting on that night, but somehow the guy that didn't profit, he somehow won a competition, and it's still confusing me to this day. In my eyes, we won week one, they won week two. It was a draw, but whatever. There was no actual outline rules for that competition. It was all a mess, and to be quite honest with you, they were never competition in my eyes anyway. So.
Well, listen, next year I'll make sure that there's a few caveats that even when we lose, we win. But I know that it'll be completely different. Anyway, give me your thoughts, Dave, on this card in South Korea. I'll go to the main event in a minute, and obviously I'll give out the names. But is it a strange one right before Christmas?
It is. I feel like the UFC didn't plan their end of year schedule out as good as they have in prior years. Usually we would have an end of year pay-per-view which would come between Boxing Day and New Year, but they have cancelled it for the first time in a decade. So it's been the first time in 10 years that we won't see a end of year event, and it makes me sad because we just have a fight night to play with. But on the good side of that, we get to see Frankie Edgar and the Korean Zombie, who are two of the UFC's most notable guys, and they are going to throw down, that's for sure. And then in the co-main event, we have Alexander Rakic versus Volkan Oezdemir, and they are two heavy hitters. One of them is a former title challenger, and the other one is an up-and-comer who is a few shots within that title challenge, and that should also be a fight that you don't want to miss. Overall, the card is a bit... in terms of betting, there's a few golden fights on there. Barcelos versus Nurmagomedov. Who else do we have? Obviously the Korean Superboy Ho Choi versus Charles Jourdain. We haven't seen Ho Choi in a while, and he's a fan favorite. So there's a few bangers on there. It's just a shame that we don't have the gift of a pay-per-view at the end of the year. But as it's the last show of the year, we'll still give you some winners, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a well-supported event. You know that the South Koreans, they absolutely love their UFC. Jay, let's kick off with you on the main event. We've got the 23-7-1 Frankie Edgar going with Chang Sung-jung at 15-5-0.
Yeah, it's a tough fight for me. I love Frankie Edgar. He's a hero to many people in my part of the country. He's a UFC legend, man. But he's getting up in age. He's almost 39 years old. Everybody knows what Frankie Edgar's about. He's one of the best wrestlers that the featherweight or lightweight division have ever seen. He has great boxing in the pocket. He's not afraid to get hit one time to send two back the other way. And he's got a sick gas tank, which is a challenge for anybody, especially in a main event. What is good for anybody that takes Edgar is he only loses to elite competition. He does not take bad losses ever. The question becomes, is the Korean Zombie just another guy in the division, or is he now an elite part of this division? I tend to think, especially the way that Chan Sung-jung looked in his last two fights, I think he's crossed that threshold now to where he is more part of the elite featherweight division than he is just another guy. He was spectacular against Moicano in his last fight. He destroys Yair Rodriguez for 5 rounds until he was caught with the fluke elbow. 3 seconds left in a 25-minute fight. He ends up dropping that fight. And even the fight before that, I think he fought Dennis Bermudez, who is a great wrestler, a little below the level of Frankie, but still a very good wrestler. And he had a problem taking Chen Sung Jung down. So the only way that the Korean Zombie loses this fight is if he cannot stop Frankie Edgar from taking him down. And I think at 39 years old, Frank does not have the wrestling that he had 5 years ago. If this was 5 years ago, I would take Frankie. But right now, I think the Zombie's in his prime. He's learned from the losses that he took in that Jose Aldo fight back in 2013. And he's only 32 years old. He's been around for a decade, but he's only fought 7 times. And he's called the Korean Zombie because he's able to take an insane amount of damage, and he walks right through it to pressure the other fighter and beat them down. And something that everybody forgets is he's an underrated grappler in his own right. Once he's on the ground, he's not bad. I think the odds are fair. I bet him in a parlay with Ho Choi, the Korean Superboy. Dave will talk about him later. I think he should destroy Charles Jourdain. I think that parlay cashes. So that pays 2.10, and I feel good about it. So that's what I'm going to rock with in the main event.
Okay, Dave, obviously when we talk about the South Americans and we get the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, what are the South Koreans, what's their favourite method of attack?
They're all-round martial artists, Fash, I'll give them that. They don't have one martial art in their tool belt. They mix it up. They're true martial artists. And to be honest, the Korean Zombie is a pure example of that. His wrestling defense is great. His striking is great. The main flaw for him that could cause him concerns against Frankie Edgar is his willingness to just throw down and not care. He will take 3 to give 4. So yeah, we have to give respect to Frankie Edgar's power here, and let's not forget that Frankie Edgar dropped Yair Rodriguez, who was also younger, fresher, and the up and comer. He dropped him in the second round with no problem at all. Frankie has only been finished once in his career. That also stands out to me. The guy to do that was Brian Ortega, and to be honest, it was a lucky catch in my opinion. It was a lucky catch. He caught him. A lot of fighters, one punch and it can be over. We saw it not so long ago. Alistair Overeem was dominating the entire fight, won in the last 4 seconds with a devastating knockout. This fight is a real tough fight to handicap. You're coming up against the Korean Zombie, who is undefeated in Korea. He has just been going through guys we didn't expect him to. I actually faded him against Renato Carneiro. I did not expect him to get through it. I did fade him against Yair Rodriguez as well, which was a good move, but the Korean Zombie was winning that fight right up until the KO from the elbow in the 5th round. It was all his, and then with no time left, he got knocked out, and it was a shame. So I have to look at the Korean Zombie's record and try and match someone up who has a similar style to Frankie Edgar. The closest is probably going to be Dennis Bermudez, I guess. But Dennis Bermudez doesn't have the wrestling or the power that Frankie has given us. And it's just a real tough fight to handicap overall. From a betting perspective, it's a stay away from me. I take a look at the odds and I see Frankie Edgar coming at plus 170. Let me double check those odds now. Yeah, Frankie Edgar's coming in at, well, he's slightly dropped now to plus 153. But I see one more in the dog. I really do. The Korean Zombie, we haven't saw any activity from him. It's been a fight per year since 2017. That's due to Korean military obligations, which is mandatory in their country. He doesn't have a choice. I'm sure if he had a choice, we would have saw him fight 2 or 3 times a year, because the Korean Zombie is just pure entertainment. He's gone up, even in his short career, he's still gone up against some of the best. An old version of Dustin Poirier beat, a classic fight with Jose Aldo, which he lost. But for me, I'm going to have to go with the answer. New Jersey's finest. I'll give the dog one more shot. if Frankie fails this, I feel like it will be the time to start considering fading him against opposition that is, um, not the elite anymore. He's obviously still a top 5 fighter, top 10 fighter in the lightweight or the featherweight division, in my opinion. He's a legend in the business, and I think he can just push through this fight. If he can weather the Korean Zombie's early onslaught, which is going to happen, I think he can win this through the intelligence that he holds and the experience that he holds over the Korean Zombie. The Korean Zombie may have been in the UFC for a long time, but he hasn't had the wars and he hasn't had the fights that Frankie has had. Frankie's going into hostile territory. He's taken this fight. I think it was 18 days notice he took this fight on. You got to tip your hat to Frankie. He'll take it in the lightweight division, the featherweight division. He doesn't care. And I'm going to back him one more time and side with the answer, Frankie Edgar.
Okay, let's move on then.
Go
on then, Jay.
Flash quickly. One thing to keep in mind is judges in different countries are really suspect. If this fight somehow goes the distance and it's even remotely close, I would say that there's probably an 80% chance that the Korean Zombie gets the win there, even if Frankie deserves the win. So that, in different countries like this, like Brazil, Dave and I see suspect judges all the time. So that's something to keep in mind too.
Well, you just don't do it.
I would be happy to lose.
Well, yeah, exactly. You just don't back Frankie Edgar to win on a decision. It's simple as that. If you're going to back Frankie Edgar, you've got to back him to win the fight with knockouts, and that means you have to boost up your price. I think that Dave's like half right there when he said, I don't really want to have a bet in this race. It's not or in this fight because it's not really a betting proposition. Then he talks himself into it because the odds are plus, and plus to him is like cheese to a mouse. But anyway, let's move on. Co-main, Volkan Oezdemir at 16-4-0 and Alexander Rakic at 12-1-0. And Dave, we'll let you go first.
Yeah, we've got a guy who stormed the UFC within such a small amount of time in Volkan Oezdemir. This guy popped out of nowhere, had an MMA career that wasn't that fruitful. He hadn't really been around the block, but he stepped into the UFC and he started finishing guys left, right, and center. Before he knew it, he was gifted with a title shot, which it was a quick turnaround for Volkan. And as soon as he got that title shot, it soon went downhill. He suffered a knockout loss to Daniel Cormier, which from there on out just seemed to be the downfall of him, because his following fight, he lost to Anthony Smith by submission, and then he lost to current title challenger Dominic Reyes. He made the comeback in his last fight, Volkan did, against Ilia Latifi, but Latifi is at the end of his career. He's not the same guy he once was, and a victory over Latifi is not something that I'm actually worried about. I know it was a knockout in round 2. Look, these boys hold power no matter what they're doing, whether they're early on in their career, in their late 20s, early 30s, or whether they're at the back end, of their 30s, coming up to 40. They all hold power in the light heavyweight division and the heavyweight division. So obviously anyone can get the knockout at any time, but the fade will continue on Volkan Oezdemir for me, as he's fighting against a guy who has been brutal, who is looking good potential for knockout of the year, actually, when he fought Jimmy Manuwa, landed a high kick and knocked his head into the crowd. He was out stone cold. This guy is dangerous. He's from Vienna in Austria, not really well known for their martial arts, but obviously Rakic is proven his nation different as he continues to knock people out, and he's now got a 4-0 record in the UFC. 2 of those were by knockout, and those were his 2 recent fights against 2 dangerous heavy hitters as well. Now this will be, I guess Volkan's acting as a gatekeeper in this one. I feel like if Rakic gets through Oezdemir, that's enough, especially in this division, to grant yourself a title shot against John Jones or Dominic Reyes. Because to be quite honest, there's not many people challenging for this title. So a three fight streak, especially with knockouts, can get you a title shot instantly, much like Volkan Oezdemir. In fact, I see their careers pretty similar. When Volkan first joined, I can see Rakic kind of emulating what he did. Early success, and a quick title shot. I'm not sure if they want to rush Rakic like this, but they don't have many options in the light heavyweight division. So to their fighting abilities, Rakic's offensive striking he's gonna have to deal with Uzdemir's offensive striking in the first round. I feel like if he can survive them first 5 minutes and avoid them heavy rows from Volkan, it's all Rakic's to lose. He's gonna be the better grappler in my opinion. I'm not even sure if he'll use any grappling. I'm not sure if he'll need to. But if he does, he's got it there in his back pocket. And I just think we could just see another knockout from Rakic here. Volkan might slip up and get his head knocked off just like Jimmy Manoa did. And the odds are not too bad either. -145 on Rakic. I feel that's about right. I feel them odds, I think that's about right. Slight favourite for Alexander Rakic in my opinion, because it is the light heavyweight division. We can overlook Volkan Oezdemir, but for sure, Alexander Rakic is going to be my pick, but he will be the first half of this week's Punch and Pilot.
Nice
I won't
one.
be betting him straight.
Nice one, Dave. Jay, add to that.
Yeah, it's an interesting fight at 205. Like Dave said, Volkan Oezdemir came into the UFC. He puts the entire light heavyweight division on notice that he was for real. And his first 3 fights gets the win over St. Preux, knocks out Serkinov and Jimmy Manoa. All 3 were legitimate UFC light heavyweight fighters. They weren't tomato cans. So after the 3rd win in a row, like Dave said, everybody thought he was the next star at 205. The UFC believed in him. They put him in there with Cormier. He gets crushed. Then he gets beat by Dominic Reyes and Anthony Smith, both top 5 guys in the division. So he gets planted there. So going into his last fight, he's 3-3 in the UFC. He beats up a never was in Ilir Latifi, and he gets the win. So the biggest question for Oezdemir is Alexander Rakic a legitimate guy, or does he have a chance to be special? Because if he does, Oezdemir seems to be in trouble based on his track record, right? So, Oezdemir hits hard. He puts guys down if he could hit the button, but he's slow. He has no footwork. He has average cardio at best, and he's chinny. If you hit him on the jaw, he drops. On the other side of the cage, I like this kid a lot. I think he's got a real chance to make some noise at 205. He's a kickboxer. He's a striker. None of these guys are incredible on the ground. Rakic is the better one, though, for sure, of the 2. He lost his first fight as a professional mixed martial artist, and he never looked back. 12 wins, 9 knockouts. He's only fought 3 times in the UFC, but he already has the cleanest head kick, like Dave said, in the light heavyweight division I've ever seen when he kicked Jimmy Manoa. He's got real power. He knocked out Clark with like a meaningless back fist. That's I'm taking Rakic at 1.74. And the main reason is the kid does not take damage. If Oezdemir can't hit him, then he can't beat him. He's got phenomenal defensive striking, as nobody gets hits less in the UFC light heavyweight division than him. He only absorbs 1.6 significant strikes per minute, and he hits people 5.5 times a minute. So I think he's going to be able to survive that first round, which is always Oezdemir's best round. So I took him at 1.74. I agree with Dave.
Okay, then, so we're going for Alexander Rakic, 12-1, hoping to make it 13-1 after the weekend in South Korea. Dave, if you can wrap this up for me. Cho Do-ho, 14-3-0, against Charles Jourdain at 9-2-0.
Yeah, the two biggest fan favourites on this card is going to be obviously the Korean Zombie in the main event. And then a couple fights before, we have the Korean Superboy making his return. Who doesn't love the Korean Superboy? If you want entertainment, go and watch his fights. He came into the UFC with 8 knockouts. He'd only had 11 fights, I believe, when he came to the UFC. 8 of those were by knockout. We all know how Dana and obviously the fans, we love a knockout artist. Unfortunately, he couldn't continue that forever. I feel like they threw him to the wolves quite early. I'm not gonna lie, he was 20. So he would have been 26 at the time, and they're throwing him to guys like Cub Swanson and Jeremy Stevens after having, like, I guess, like 2 low-level fights and then like a medium-level fight in Sam Cecilia and Thiago Tavares. I mean, I understand that he did knock these guys out, and he did knock them out in the first round because he has the power. His striking ability is beautiful. But yeah, the way they threw him to Cub and he lost to Cub Swanson by decision, and then they threw him to Jeremy Stevens straight after, I thought it was so unfair. But it's been a while since we saw him. Now he's took some time off, and he's got the perfect matchup in my opinion. He's fighting a guy in Charles Jourdain, who only has 3 years of martial arts experience. So this is a settled fight for me. Listen, when we're traveling to different countries here and it's not inside America, we know that they need winners for that fan base. It's obvious, you know, when they go to China, they need to give China some winners. When they go to Korea, they need to give the Koreans some winners. And I think the Korean Superboy is one of them. He's fighting. I don't have much to say about Charles Jourdain. I think he's going to get knocked out. I think we're going to see the old version of the Korean Superboy here. He's going to come in. We're going to see that beautiful striking, and he's going to drop his opponent.
Dave, what's the juice?
I don't see this fight. Say again?
What's the juice?
The juice, there is juice. There's a reason for that. But that's why it's a part of the punching parlay this week, and it'll be the second half of the punching parlay. The juice is 1.36, right. Minus 277 on the American line.
Okay.
That's the best line I could find at Betway. But you combine that with Alexander Rakic, and we're looking at 2.6, I think I got on the punching parlay. So yeah, so a unit on those two for me is something that I am confident in.
Okay.
I'm not confident in the light heavyweights throwing down, but still, I'm confident in Rakic to finish a fade in Jourdain.
Okay, we'll take a leaf out of Jay's book and put in the Korean zombie, Chang Sung-jun. Right, Dave, I'm going to let you have the last say. Obviously, I've probably got no choice in that anyway, because they'll be turning the lights out on us. But Jung De-eun, 11-2-0, against our old friend Mike Rodriguez at 9-3-0 and 1 no contest. You've got 3 minutes, starting now.
Right, okay. This fight, this fight is real hard to handicap. Both dudes are not impressive fighters. In my opinion, they are not UFC caliber. Neither fighter is UFC caliber. But when I saw one guy as a slight underdog against a Mike Rodriguez who submitted to a toe hold, I have to take the guy who got a beating in his last fight, overcame the adversity, and then finished the fight by submission in the last round. I have to go with the Korean here, Da Jourdain. He's got an opponent who's definitely going to be a better striker than him, that's for sure. Does Mike Rodriguez have more power than Kadris Ibragimov, who was Da Jourdain's first opponent in the UFC? Listen, he got pieced up for the entire fight, and then he came back and he won by submission. Mike Rodriguez, I feel this could be a similar fight. Mike Rodriguez is going to have success on the feet. He's going to be the better striker. But as an all-round MMA fighter and the fight IQ that Mike Rodriguez has shown me, I have to fade this dude. And yeah, Jung is going to be a play on my Dogs in the Odds article this week for sure. I was able to get him at plus 113. That line has now come down. I believe it's at a pick'em as we speak. But yeah, it's more of a fade on Mike Rodriguez. Neither guy is an amazing martial art opinion. And you know what? Jung has got power as well. So Jung finished this fight by knockout if he wants to. I just think that Mike Rodriguez
Look at that. Look at that. The satellite. Sorry, Dave, you were breaking up all over there. That's the satellite gods telling us that we've had enough now, Dave. Come on, stop it. And save some of that breath for tomorrow's lower leagues, because obviously no one can talk that much over 2 days.
Heavyweight.
So now the satellite gods are giving him another chance.
Hello.
Yeah, we are here. We're not ignoring you, Dave.
My everything started. You started skipping everything. I don't even know what you were saying, but yeah, Jung is the play, obviously. Rodriguez hasn't even fought outside the USA before. That's one thing to take into consideration. Jung's on 11-fight winning streak, and is undefeated at light heavyweight. So yeah, it's a play on the dog for me. Plus 113. Jung will be the last dogs in their odds for this show of 2019.
Okay, well, it's not. Okay, you can have the last dogs and odds on this show, but tomorrow I'll see you on the lower leagues. And Jay, tomorrow, NFL.
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to seeing you, sir. It's a show that I absolutely love when you're there, and there's just something missing when you're not. So I will see you both tomorrow doing what you do best, okay?
Yes, sir.
Dave, see you soon. Jay, thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Them boys are totally off their heads and they know their stuff as well. I absolutely love them two being on the show. And tomorrow, NFL with Jay and Spread. And we'll go with the Bundesliga. And then Dave will be here with the lower leagues. He does find value in that minefield that is the championship. Until then, you take care.